Ambitus. My lecture today concerns lost tense, the loss of tense. Tense has various meanings. Physically, it refers to rigidity. A tense body is unrelaxed, tight, brittle. A non-tense or untense body is unbridled, relaxed. Where there is tension, release is necessary and inevitable. The transition from a state of tension to one of release implies motion, a jettison forward. In linguistics, tense is a grammatical category that expresses the time of an action or state in relation to a reference point, usually the moment of speaking. In many languages, tense is not just time, but a system of marking temporal relationships in verbs, often combined with how an action unfolds, whether it is continuous or completed. Tense is a way to order past, present, future. It is the grammatical expression of time reference through verb forms. Past tense, she spoke. Present tense, she speaks. Future tense, she will speak. These are degrees of existence. In the philosophy of time, presentism is the theory that only the present truly exists. The past no longer exists, and the future does not yet exist. Only what is happening now is real. In the presentist view, the world was fundamentally dynamic in the sense that there is an objective presentness, and different moments of time instantiate objective presentness sequentially. The objective present moment is ontologically privileged because it is the only real moment in the world. According to classical philosophy, the degree to which an item exists is proportional to its distance from the present. To have zero temporal distance from the present has the highest possible degree of existence. The present passes constantly, piling upon the past, and the future extends indefinitely, sourcing the past. But does the future exist ontologically? A natural response is to say that the future did not exist before, does not exist now, but will exist. The presentist maintains the position that only present objects and events exist simpliciter, implying a hierarchy that always favors the present. Being temporally present is considered the highest degree of existence. Being past and being future by a merely infinitesimal amount is the second highest degree of existence. To be past by 1 hour or future by 1 hour are lower degrees of existence. And being past by 5 billion years or future by 5 billion years are still lower degrees of existence. The presentist maintains the position that only present objects and events exist. The past used to exist, and while the future does not exist now, it will. Eternalism, however, is an approach to the ontological nature of time which posits that all existence in time is equally real, whether it be at the past, future, or transpiring now as I speak. But real, like time, is a disputed variable gauge. Similarly, present, as in here, is irregular and subjective. A large spectrum of that which exists might not be said to be present. To refer to or to recall is to invoke a sort of spectre, a ghost, a presence which lingers on the exterior of our consciousness, a sort of immaterialness, a vague distortion that the human mind does not possess the capacity to interpret. At the subatomic level, matter does not exist with certainty in some places, but rather shows the tendency to exist. Similarly, atomic events do not occur with certainty at definite times and in definite ways, but rather show tendencies to occur. Some forms of existence are demonstrated by way of effects they have on overt matter, possessing qualities that are phenomenological or gravitational rather than obvious. A dark matter halo is a cosmological unit that functions as a gravitational scaffold. It surrounds and stabilizes a galaxy. The halo itself cannot be seen. It is observed by way of the structured effect it has on a galaxy. Similarly, we do not see gravity, but we observe its effect by way of the waxing and waning of the tide in relation to the moon, or when an apple falls from a tree. Magnetic fields, pheromones, and radiation operate similarly. At the subatomic level, solid material objects dissolve into wave-like patterns of probabilities, and these patterns ultimately do not represent probabilities of things, but rather probabilities of interconnections. According to the growing block theory of time, the world expands as new things come into presence. The theory argues that the past and present both exist, while the future does not yet exist. The growth of the block happens in the present, a very thin slice of space-time, where more of space-time is continually coming into being. Therefore, the block universe is said to be growing. Events in our world are causally related. The causal relation is inherently asymmetrical. Effects depend on their causes, whereas the causes do not depend on their effects. This asymmetry is possible because the cause's effects occur after their cause. The growing block theory draws a distinction between ceasing to be and ceasing to be present. When something passes, it doesn't stop existing, it simply recedes from the advancing edge of reality. Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance involves the permanence of past events and their conditioning effects on both the material and mental dimension. Sheldrake believes that memory is inherent in nature, and that natural systems inherit a collective memory from all previous things of their kind, proposing a form of telepathy-type interconnection between organisms. Rather than locating memory within the brain, Henri Bergson argues that memory belongs to duration, an extended dimension of lived time that exceeds physical storage. The brain does not contain memories so much as select and actualize them from the continuous flow of the past. Every present. Plato's concept of anamnesis extends this idea. In his dialogue Meno, an uneducated boy is asked a series of questions about how to double the area of a square. The boy first gives incorrect answers, but later realizes his mistakes and, through questioning alone, eventually reaches the correct solution. Plato theorizes that because the boy was not taught any facts and was only guided with questions, the boy recollected knowledge that his soul already possessed before birth. In Plato's epistemology produced. Within Christian theology, particularly in the Eucharist, anamnesis is not simply remembrance, but active represencing. The past made operative in the present. What is remembered becomes present again. This line of thinking rejects the notion of memory as a static repository of information. Instead, memory is conceived as a dynamic medium that bridges temporal distance. Memory is active, decisive, and conditional. Irish author Iris Murdoch considers remembering a feature of the uniquely human moral capacity. In Metaphysics is a Guide to Morals, she writes, "We forgive people in the remoter past because we think, see more clearly the limitations of their situation, whereas we cannot see our own limitations so clearly. Thinking about the past, then, is therefore moral thinking. Our brain attends to and catalogs that which it deems significant. This value is determined by one's socio-cultural background, which informs an individual's predisposition and moral compass." Murdoch writes, "When we say religion is disappearing, part of what is disappearing is both the occurrence of certain experience and also our tendency to notice them, and to instinctively or reflexively lend them meaning. There is in existence plenty of material that we do not possess the sensitivity to perceive, let alone to interpret. And within that, another dimension of consciousness. There is the saying, out of sight, out of mind. Extrasensory perception refers to reception of information not gained through recognized physical senses. A flexible mind may develop a superconscious ability to sense multiple time layers at once. The ability to detect the lingering, indecipherable remnants may result in a kind of unconscionable omniscience, an unsettling, tangled awareness. What we perceive as whole exists to us in this state only for the duration it is caught in our gaze. What the naked eye perceives as real, a trained eye sees beyond. Derrida's view of history is one characterized by repetition and disruption. This is the foundation of his notion of ontology, which refers to the return or persistence of elements from the social or cultural past. The past lingers as a vestige, detritus, memorial, ghost. At times, this can produce a sense of temporal disjunction or dyschronia, when sights, sounds, sensations don't seem to match up with the reality at present. The very idea of the ghost as that which comes from the past to manifest itself in the present, and yet which belongs to neither, simultaneously both absent and present, challenges our belief in the unbroken process of linear time. In this sublunar or temporal reality, we destroy and recreate our surroundings at regular intervals, which engenders an incredibly faulty idea of permanence. In Greek, the word idea signifies the permanent aspect of a thing. In order to know, to possess certainty, the world must be unchanging. In order to base his thought on something, there must be some form of plateau. Memory conditions identity and situates perception. It predicates the present, but dematerializes as it progresses. Time renders all things unrecognizable, enacting a form of amnesia that consumes matter and displaces objects and events, disturbing the structure of chronological hierarchy. Nothing is ever erased. No development, entropy, or more generally structuration is ever stopped, only rendered culturally and sensorially imperceptible. We forget routinely in order to reinforce our own sense of physical and emotional presence. This enables us to perceive the present as present. Forgetting enables us to maintain a sense of coherency, and that where we find ourselves at any given moment is indeed where we are. In psychology, forgetting serves an essential purpose. It reduces information overload as it removes details that are unlikely to be useful, allowing attention and memory systems to focus on what is deemed most essential. This non-conscious omission of certain superfluous details informs and supports decision-making. This allows people to adapt better to evolving situations. Psychologists study forgetting through several mechanisms, including decay, through which memories become weaker when they are not used, interference, when other memories compete with or disrupt recall, retrieval failure, when the memory exists but cannot be accessed at the moment. The motivation to forget may be conscious or unconscious. Forgetting also serves a biological need. A mother forgets the pain of childbirth, so she is not deterred from conceiving again. In the organic world, matter is rhythmically eclipsed by the pole of the present. A form of material amnesia transpires. A substance evolves and persists via the slackening of its previous form. This cyclical autophagy is reconstituting, ensuring longevity. Metamorphosis and decomposition, for example, are autophagic cycles. When an insect goes through metamorphosis, its previous form is reconstituted. The creature reassembles around the aorta, the internal plumb line. New forms bear a recessed resemblance to past forms, though it may only be internally apparent. That is one way in which the past continues to exist. The anatomy of the human body evolved from its four-footed predecessors. An internal skeletal rotation occurred over time to support the two-footed form. The plumb line runs vertically through the body, passing from the earlobe through the shoulder joint, the center of the hip, the midline of the knee, and down to the ankle. This internal plumb bob is an axis used to calibrate upright alignment. Vestiges of the four-footed predecessor exist in the physique of the modern human. Via somatic practices such as Alexander technique or Feldenkrais, the body is recalibrated to support its prior four-footedness. Practitioners tend to experience a deep sense of calm and rootedness. Somatic practices encourage the development of a relaxed acceptance of world rhythms, as well as an awareness of the body as supported by gravity, rather than weighted down by it. This conscious shift tends to have a relieving influence on the mind. Anamnesis is the closest that the human mind can come to experiencing the freedom of the soul before it is encumbered by matter. Socrates contends that the soul is immortal and possesses eternal knowledge, but forgets it in the shock of birth. The transition from a state of buoyancy in the womb to one influenced by gravity. This stands in stark contrast to empiricism, which posits that all knowledge is derived from experience. The world expands beyond our sensorial perception. The unidentified or unidentifiable is presenting, pasting, futuring, overriding delineation, extending into disrecognition. Nothing is ever erased. No demolition, development, or entropy is ever stopped. It is only rendered culturally and sensorially imperceptible. Residues and clues remain, even if the presentist gaze has become desensitized to or actively resists these lingering vestiges. The relationship between the assembled and disassembled state is reflexive and nonlinear. It's an infinite and indefinite lifeline marked by instances of recuperation and tragedy. The time in which a given object or accumulation of matter appears visually whole may only be a short moment of its total lifespan. This is true in regards to both its any given substance existed before structure was enforced, and a long life follows. Material rearranges at a constant rate, propelling from and further abstracting the previous form. Simone Weil's notion of decreation entails that the sole object of one's existence is to give up one's existence, to become uncreated, which implies a process of transformation rather than an end. Life is sustained via its unending dissolve. Being is more subject to accident than to action. Everything in existence is somewhere between its decreation and recreation, moving in and out of material legibility. There is wisdom in the release of the notion of intact or autonomous. According to Platonic metaphysics, our world is an imitation of another located outside time. In this other world, destruction is thought to be completely irrelevant, as it is composed of transcendent, eternal models. Our Earth, this one, emerged from stardust. Chaos came to be, and from chaos or total disorder came abundance. Complete and utter abandon of semblance propagates life. Life suffocates within limits that are too close. It aspires in manifold ways to an impossible growth. It releases a steady flow of excess resources, possibly involving a large squandering of energy. The limit of growth being reached, life, without being in a closed container, always enters into ebullition. Without exploding, its extreme exuberance pours out in a movement always bordering explosion. This exuberant overflow never fully subsides. The explosion continues, though at a diminished intensity. Matter is unmade via gradual disintegration into dust. But dust is not simply an inert residue. As an indexical particulate, it bears a trace of what has been, preserving former iterations within its dispersed materiality. Paleontology is the study of dust or strewn particles. Dust, a collection of mismatched, entangled fragments, related in that they are all different. As a substance, it provides valuable insight into life, energy, evolution, the environment. Dust provides a material index, a measure of time, time passing, of material persistence and variability. There is twice as much dust in the world today as there was in the 19th century. It is thought that as much as 40,000 tons of cosmic dust, reaches the Earth's surface for each passing year. Thus, 60% of the dust on Earth could be said to consist of supernatural material. In a journal entry, Da Vinci wrote that dust, being a thing of earth, has weight, and although from its fineness it is easily tossed up and mingles with the air, it nevertheless readily falls again. The finest parts rise highest. Thus, levity spares matter from continued redistribution within our biological realm. The finest, most near to invisible particles of dust escape upward, freed from gravity, and the more substantial bits linger here on Earth. Matter disperses and eventually, when broken down into small enough bits, rises skyward, pulled out of Earth's orbit like a layer of shed skin. In medieval times, the planets, stars, and invisible orbs were thought to be composed of a fifth element called celestial ether, or quintessence. Its heavenly characteristics made it the subtlest material in the universe. Ether is considered extra-lunar, from the beyond. It is neither heavy nor light, neither rare nor dense, nor is it divisible by the penetration of another body. No corruption or alteration, universal or particular, affects the ethereal nature. Platonism is the view that there exist such things as abstract objects. Objects that are non-spatial, non-temporal, non-physical, non-mental, and non-causal. The Buddhist philosopher Ashwagosha describes suchness as that which is neither in existence nor that which is in non-existence, nor that which is at once existence and non-existence, nor that which is not at once existence and non-existence. Eternalism speaks to the incorruptibility of matter as past, present, and future hold no hierarchical distinction. An eternalist world is fundamentally a static block in which all moments exist equally. Such a static world, eternalists believe, can be wholly captured by a single, complete tenseless description. When tense is lost, verbs shed their chronological indication and merge with other parts of speech. This enables other word forms to indicate condition, between, amongst, through, which implies states of presence outside of time. To live tenselessly is to doubt one's own present or presentness. Derrida put forth the concept of arche écriture, speech which is inherited and conditional as the basis of meaning. But what of the second impulse which is speech before words? Experience of language shapes perception. It is structuration. Far before developing the capability to speak, infants begin to monitor phonetic sounds from their own language, that which they already perceive to have meaning. Humans emerge from and co-evolve with language. From its first moment, the mind is besieged or crowded. Being and non-being do not exclude each other, but are through language interwoven. The extra-linguistic reality escapes description and therefore escapes our discernment. The imagination serves as a passage between sense and thought. It synthesizes forms of intuition which categories of understanding arrange. It synthesizes forms of intuition with categories of understanding, arranging sensory experience into coherent patterns. Reality, as it appears to us, is already an imaginative construction before it becomes conscious thought. Plato, in his allegory of the cave, read to reality directly, but through symbolic and perceptual mediations. We live by moving beyond our images. Perception is inseparable from attention. Imagination is not merely the production of representations, but the continual revision of them. Attention is itself a creative act. It determines what enters experience and what remains invisible. The attention we extend to an object, place, or being is itself a structure. We are subjects of aesthetic conditioning, creatures of habit, and participants in the continual production of order. Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence rejects the idea that meaning resides in the hidden nominal realm beyond appearances. If experience endlessly returns, then significance must be discovered within the patterns of this world rather than beyond it. Imagination is therefore not an escape from reality, but one of the forces through which reality is continually constructed. There is a human tendency to resist the natural decline of things. Perhaps this impulse arises from what Loretto describes as an innate sense of disharmony, a feeling of estrangement that compels us to seek order, permanence, and meaning. This resistance could be interpreted as evidence that humanity stands outside of nature, but rather our impulse to order, preserve, and create is itself a natural force. An expression of life striving to overcome chaos through the imposition of form. It could be that this inner disharmony may be what produces the human capacity for destruction. On the natural history of destruction, Sebald reflects on society's struggle to reckon with the devastation of the Second World War, observing that many people, particularly writers and other cultural figures, felt compelled to respond to the catastrophe, but found themselves unable to do so. Meanwhile, nature's ability to regenerate was not impaired by the firestorms. Sebald notes that the date of a building's destruction can often be inferred from the vegetation that had taken root among the ruins. Nature assimilated the rubble more readily than society could comprehend it. And then came the work of rebuilding. The impulse to reconstruct or restore what has already been lost, even when that loss remains beyond comprehension, is a recurring feature of human behavior. Faced with irreparable destruction, we nevertheless seek salvage. In 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Clervaux Castle suffered significant damage after being bombed by German troops. Reduced to ruins, the state purchased the castle and undertook a restoration work, reinstating its former appearance. This history informs the context of today's lecture. There are residues, physical, historical, and psychic. There is a chronological tangle. The appearance of Clervaux Castle does not match the cited date of its foundation in the 12th century. It has been built and then rebuilt. Traces of its previously destructed state are evident in the present form. This earlier incarnation extends from a prior time period and merges with the present. The past forms a scaffold for the future. An architectural example is the Colomba Museum in Cologne, which is built on top of and through the ruins of a church, a visual depiction of an interrupted timeline. Or the MUDAM, which illustrates a similar phenomenon. Destruction is generative. It doesn't eliminate. Rather, it presupposes the conditions for emergence. Phenomena such as friction, resonance, and noise are not destructive in the obvious sense. They are forms of invisible interference that can either inhibit or structure. It is through these subtle mechanisms that transformation actually occurs. Resonance is when a system vibrates more strongly because it is being driven at a rate that matches its natural frequency. A small repeated force can create a very large effect if the timing matches the system perfectly. For example, a wine glass can shatter from a singer hitting a note that matches the glass's resonant frequency. The word resonance is also used metaphorically. Emotional resonance, when something is deeply affecting. Cultural resonance, an idea that echoes strongly within society. Culture and metaphor are invisible architectures of the psyche. They provide the cognitive scaffold through which reality becomes intelligible. Much like a dark matter halo whose unseen gravitational influences shape the foundation and expansion of galaxies, symbolic systems organize the emergence of meaning while operating below our awareness. A Chladni plate demonstrates how resonance transforms invisible frequencies into visible order. Subtle vibrations organize dispersed particles into patterns, illustrating how hidden forces give rise to structured form. Reality develops recursively rather than linearly. Time, consciousness, biological evolution, and philosophy all grow by transforming what already exists instead of beginning anew. Pattern field theory reframes time not as a linear progression, but as resonance unfolding through recurring patterns. A spiral captures this dynamic more accurately than a straight line. It repeatedly returns to familiar configurations while simultaneously expanding into new territory. The Fibonacci sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on, embodies this recursive logic, as each new term emerges through the integration of the two which preceded. Growth, therefore, occurs as the continual transformation of inherited patterns. This recursive architecture appears throughout nature. Spiral galaxies preserve the gravitational memory of billions of years while continually generating new stars. Likewise, the DNA double helix carries evolutionary history forward by preserving and modifying inherited information. Every present moment incorporates what came before, much as each Fibonacci number contains the conditions of its own emergence. The Fibonacci spiral unites cognition and cosmology. Consciousness itself may be understood as the recursive interpretation of inherited material. Thought does not create ex nihilo. It resonates with what precedes it, transforming rather than replacing it. In this sense, metaphysics is not the search for another world, but the manifestation of the internal relations through which reality continually organizes itself. Philosophy exhibits the same recursive structure. It never returns to an absolute beginning because every question inherits the conceptual residues of earlier thought. Its movement is spiral rather than circular. Wittgenstein wrote that thought is surrounded by a halo, suggesting that meaning extends from and into an indeterminate field of associations. Plato's myths operate similarly. Rather than presenting doctrines as fixed conclusions, they preserve philosophical inquiry in narrative form, concealing the author's voice so that each generation must re-enter the dialogue for itself. Their anamnetic power lies not in recovering a lost origin, but in reactivating a pattern of thinking that continually renews itself through participation. Nothing begins from nothing. Every new form is generated through the transformation of existing relations. My lecture today is comprised of contingencies. Through it, the spiral extends. At the end of my talk, I'll be on a more exterior coil than I was when I began. In the recent past, I gestured to a moment in a future that is nearing now. I recall it well. Approaches to the future can be understood along two broad axes. Whether the future is regarded as fixed or open to intervention, and whether it is imagined as pessimistic, neutral, or optimistic. They also span multiple temporal horizons, from the immediate and probable to the possible and distant, revealing a spectrum of perspectives on time and human agency. Within this spectrum, ancient oracular practices treat the future as predetermined and beyond human control, whereas contemporary foresight methods, such as scenario planning, conceive of it as contingent, plural, and open to shaping through informed action. In Chinese thought, anticipation emerges from an understanding of the world as dynamic and in constant flux, requiring adaptive, context-sensitive responses rather than fixed predictions. Anticipation is closely linked to an understanding of the world as constantly in flux. The future is not a distant abstraction, but rather in the air, forming within the present moment as it unfolds. In the West, the tradition of strategic foresight rests on the premise that human beings have the will and capacity to influence the future in favor of the desirable, and that this capacity carries a moral obligation to reflect upon possible futures and the paths that lead toward them. Yet the future resists conceptual representation. It cannot be fully known or pictured in advance because it has not yet acquired determined form. Like the sublime, the future is encountered as an indeterminate horizon that exceeds the limits of conceptual thought. Its power lies in that it remains unresolved. Our relationship to the future is therefore shaped less by prediction than by attention. Attention is itself a structuring force. It determines whether the future appears near or distant, foreboding or luminous. The sublime emerges precisely through this encounter with what exceeds conceptual determination. It is not the experience of a particular form, but a formlessness itself, an awareness of the limits of representation. Plato understood anamnesis as a movement toward what has been forgotten, rather than the invention of something entirely new. At the threshold where conceptual knowledge gives way to uncertainty, recollection becomes an imaginative act, an openness to forms of understanding that remain beyond language. Working at this boundary of darkness, anamnesis retrieves possibilities of forgetting occurs when a proper noun becomes a common noun. When what was once singular slips into the generic. Forgetting is therefore not only the loss of recollection, but the erosion of distinction. Human existence could be understood as the pursuit of coherency, the gathering of experiences into a meaningful whole. Yet the inverse is equally true. Everything also tends toward incoherence. Memory fragments and narratives unravel. Coherence is an achievement rather than a permanent condition. It is always threatened by entropy. In retrograde amnesia, memories formed before a traumatic event become inaccessible, sometimes erasing years or even decades of a person's past. The continuity that links the present self to its history is interrupted. In interrograde amnesia, by contrast, the past remains largely intact, but new experiences fail to consolidate into long-term memory. The present cannot accumulate into a future. The hippocampus occupies a crucial role in this process. Damage to it and the surrounding medial temporal lobe is strongly associated with the loss of episodic autobiographical memory. The capacity to remember lived experience as one's own. Without episodic memory, identity is deprived of its temporal architecture. The self no longer inhabits a continuous narrative, but a succession of disconnected moments. In one case, origin is erased. In the other, the future cannot take hold. Cycle their own damaged components to preserve the organism's vitality. Forgetting functions in a comparable way. Memory cannot simply accumulate without limit. It requires selection and omission. Autophagy points toward both origin and endpoint. It is a process of continual internal dissolution that makes future growth possible. Being is sustained through cycles of construction and deconstruction. The beginning and the end are linked by the same recursive act. What is discarded becomes the condition for what can emerge. Forgetting is transformation, the metabolism through which being persists. All matter is forgetful. Truth is forgetful. Immediacy is often understood as direct, unmediated experience. A moment before reflection, representation, or interpretation intervenes. Looking at a painting, for example, one may cease to notice the canvas altogether, experiencing the depicted scene as though it were simply present. The medium is indispensable precisely because it disappears. Its success lies in being forgotten. Immediacy also possesses characteristics of both the homophonic heterographs immanent, existing or operating within, inherent, and imminent, about to happen. Plato privileges speech over writing for this reason. Speech appears more immediate because words seem to emerge directly from the speaker, while writing makes the medium visible. Yet this distinction reveals a broader condition. Every experience relies on forms of mediation that become transparent through familiarity. Memory functions as such a medium. Forgetting, then, is the condition of immediacy. We forget the medium in order to encounter the world as direct. We forget language while speaking. Immediacy occupies the threshold between interiority and anticipation, between what is already operating beneath consciousness and what is perpetually emerging into it. Immanent, that which exists from within, and imminent, that which is about to arrive. What then is the immediate, and what exactly is now? When I look, it requires time to travel. The image that reaches my eyes is already a few nanoseconds old. Likewise, the image of me that reaches you belongs to a slightly different moment. An imperceptible interval lies between seeing and being seen. The present, then, is never perfectly synchronous. It is not a fixed point, but a negotiated one, assembled from countless temporal lags that consciousness smooths into the illusion of simultaneity. Now is less a precise instant than an approximation, subjective, contingent, and continually slipping away. A photon travels at the speed of light but experiences no time during its own existence. It is unchanging. Einstein's theorems explain that time slows as objects approach the speed of light. So for a photon, time is stopped. The now for that photon was a single instant of existence, during which the universe expanded for some 13.6 billion years. It wasn't motion that constituted time, rather it was the transformation that occurred. Our brains perceive time in a specifically biologically evolved way, which enables us to survive and reproduce. But time does not need a mind. It is the process of physical change, and entropy is one metric for defining the actual process of passing time, of which the evolution towards disorder is a feature. Our perception of time is based on perceived states, the changes of which we interpret and hold in our memory. These remembered changes are recalled relative to other cyclical patterns, such as the rising and setting of the sun each day. Human time is very specific to our biological needs and evolution. It is not absolute. Absolute time cannot be conceived of because there is no privileged perspective in the cosmos. This means now is not actually a time. It is experienced when it is deliberately thought of, a medium. The reality of time is change. Past is a name we give to the whole sequence of change that led to the present state of existence, and the past are those changes remembered as relevant to how we arrived at our current state of being. The future is everything and whatever this present state will become, as substances and energies continue to change according to their natural laws. What we call time is the patterns observed from our intrinsic need to compare arrangements. We imagine these patterns to have a fundamental and independent existence, but this perceptual frame is not universally relevant. Time for the cosmos is in fact irrelevant, there just is change. The ancient Chinese philosophy of Tao, the way of change, articulates this mystery. The change that can be named is not the true change. Similarly, the time that can be named is not the true time. The perpetual rhythmic passage from an ordered to disordered state is the only actual chronological distinction. Ambitus extends from the Latin phrase ambire, meaning to surround. In music, the ambitus is the distance between the highest and lowest note, the distance amongst and surrounding the extremes. It is the phonic interval that distinguishes a tone, rendering it opulent. Similarly, the sublime is located via its disrecognition. It is experienced as and via its indetermination. The transformation from the state of amnesia to one of anamnesis, to recall that which was always already present with sudden purpose and to forget it again. To recognize something, however briefly, and release it again to the miasma. That is time. to embrace the illegibility, the simultaneity of the remembered and forgotten, to seek no distinction. That is the only eternal. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful seeing you all. Thank you.